Today we're going to discuss one of the most entertaining and provocative philosophers of all time, Friedrich Nietzsche. He was born in 1844 and died in 1900. He was named ironically, after the Prussian ruler at the time, Friedrich Wilhelm IV, and he eventually dropped his middle name, Wilhelm. So we just have Friedrich Nietzsche, who was born in the Prussian province of Saxony in a little town called Rügen. Classic Lutheran territory, and this is the same area that Martin Luther operated in. And indeed, his grandfather and father were both Lutheran pastors. He himself, Nietzsche, was a pious young boy. He had quasi-mystical experiences, it seems. So there's quite a trajectory he traverses in his life. His father had a brain illness that caused his death after a year of kind of horrifying symptoms that really dominated young Nietzsche's mind. But that was like when he was 5 that his father died. And this, in a way, is a premonition of Nietzsche's own fate, who would enter into madness in 1889. The story goes that one of the last acts of Nietzsche before his final descent into madness was he was living in the northern Italian city of Turin, and he had witnessed a man beating a horse savagely, and he ran up to the horse and hugged the horse and showed this immense compassion for the suffering animal. So I think that's important for us to keep in mind, given that the predominant image of Nietzsche is that he's for the overman, the superman that's going to be merciless and pitiless to other human lives. And that there's something there, of course, in his writings about that. But in the end, I think we have to understand that the fundamental impulses are not those of a master of the universe, because Nietzsche himself was a sickly child. He was not a great Aryan beast. He was a child who suffered immensely. He died in Weimar under the care of his sister Elizabeth, who it's important to know that because not only did she love her brother, but she was in fact involved with the most egregious anti-Semitic circles of the time. So her editing of his works would lead the way for the appropriation of Nietzsche by the Nazis. And that's important to know, because that in fact would be something Nietzsche really would have completely rejected. I mean, this is so contrary to the fundamental impulses of his thought. He went to a very rigorous, very important classical school near his home, the Schulpforta, and where they were encouraged to think in Latin, right? And it seems that he would have accomplished this. Anyway, he was brilliant and attained a university professorship in philology at the University of Basel in Switzerland at the age of 24. This is the youngest ever. Before getting there, though, he had renounced his Prussian citizenship. That's important to know because he was a man without a state for the rest of his life. And before getting to Basel, he had encountered the philosophy of Schopenhauer, which is important because that was something he shared with Wagner, who would early on be another great influence on his life, but also because Schopenhauer's interesting metaphysical conception of the world as will, as this blind, ceaseless, groundless, purposeless striving, was a template off of which Nietzsche would work. He would eventually reject that and also reject Wagner for other reasons, but that's still very important for understanding Nietzsche's thought insofar as he's got an actual system. Even though he had renounced his Prussian citizenship, he did serve as a medical orderly. He volunteered in the Franco-Prussian War, which was a very important event in continental European history, because with Prussia's victory in that war, that provided the final catalyst for the unification of Germany, the emergence of the so-called German Empire under Otto von Bismarck, and that nationalism would be so offensive in the end to Nietzsche. Wagner went all the way with that, and that was a big part of the break that happened between Wagner and Nietzsche. The continuing illnesses that Nietzsche suffered caused him to retire early after about 10 years in the philology chair at Basel, and he traveled Europe on a small pension. And that began his real writing career. The 1880s are when the great works that we know him for, Beyond Good and Evil, Genealogy of Morals, and The Gay Science and others were written. But he only had a few years of lucidity before, again, his descent into madness in 1889. It used to be thought that this was the cause of syphilis, maybe, maybe not, but there are reasons to think that there are other accounts that could be given of why he went mad. This thinker is so vital for us, not only because some of the most influential movements of contemporary philosophy have taken their inspiration from him. I mean, Foucault was deeply moved by Nietzsche, and he's still as important a philosopher as there is. In general, existentialism, postmodernism, poststructuralism, they get so much of their energy from Nietzsche, and we have to understand why that would be the case. The question I would like to bring before us that I think Nietzsche really has uppermost in his mind and heart is what makes for a healthy life and culture. Because what he saw when he looked around in late 19th century Europe, he saw a sick culture and he saw sick individuals. So there's something very much in common with Kierkegaard here, a desire to bring back a vitality to the individual that's been lost in the overwhelming capitalist conformism of 19th century Europe, the right Hegelian nationalism of Germany, especially at the time, the cultural Philistinism, which he assigned that and the nationalism as deep black marks on Wagner, and then the bourgeois moralism, which he found so offensive also. What do these things have in common? Well, they have a tendency to take what he saw as truly great men and to try to submerge them into a sea of mediocrity. So he wants to encourage health. I mean, that's kind of the basic way he wants to comment as a moralist. He didn't shy away from calling himself a moralist. He thought of himself as a psychologist, so we have to think about what those terms might mean. He loved the 16th and 17th century French moralists. These were heroes for him, La Rochefoucauld, Pascal, really important, and above all, Montaigne. These were thinkers that presented for Nietzsche a model of how to think about society and other humans. And their writing style, so you have aphorisms, you have essays, you have maxims, you have pensées. Well, that would be his literary style also. You would think, you might call in general he tends to write in a series of short essays. He didn't like the word essay, but another one of his heroes was Emerson, who did write essays. So, I mean, he was an essayist. The term he preferred was aphorist, but they weren't one-liners all the time. They were often just paragraph units. So he was journalistic, aphoristic, essayistic. That is, he didn't want to set up a system that could dominate time. He wanted to say, the moralists look at the problems right now, and they're not erecting a system, he says. What they're doing is they're trying to encourage a healthy life right now. And that's the good kind of moralism for him. And what would that be? It would be a beautiful life. Something. So it was an aesthetic evaluation that Nietzsche brought forward. He wanted a life that was healthy and beautiful, not sick and mean and ugly. The great danger, and often Nietzsche is charged with being a nihilist, but that's kind of exactly backwards, because it was nihilism that Nietzsche wanted to save us from. And what is nihilism? Well, the loss of value is really Nietzsche's sense of nihilism. That is, if nothing has a value that you can stake everything on, then life is something you do automatically, or you do as a conformist, but you don't do it vitally. You don't do it from within. You don't do it in a way that is exuberant. he saw in the project of science, which really had just gotten its name at the beginning of the 19th century, right? Science as a world historical project had been differentiated only a few decades before, but he already saw science, and he certainly saw morality as nihilistic projects, because they took away, according to Nietzsche, they took away the savor of life. They made life something that wasn't worth affirming. So he's fighting the rationalism that came from the Enlightenment, and that is realized most obviously in science and technology. But he's going beyond that to attack the roots that he put in Plato, who in his, according to Nietzsche, this is not a good reading of Plato, but according to Nietzsche, Plato is rationalistic in a way that creates another world, and this other world takes away the meaning of this world, the value and the grandeur of this world. So, but he sees a continuity from Platonic or Greek rationalism all the way through current scientism. Likewise, he was certainly critiquing a bourgeois Christianity that he saw up close, right? We've talked in recent weeks about how Christianity had become very different by the 19th century. It had to be either moralistic or deistic or pantheistic. What Nietzsche saw that and found that to be a very pathetic thing, bourgeois Christianity, as did Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard hated bourgeois Christianity, so they share that, except Nietzsche is going beyond that and is attacking at the root both Judaism and Christianity. So, and one of the insights I think we can draw, and it might be uncomfortable for certain conservative Christians, is that what Nietzsche does see, and it's not just Nietzsche though, I mean someone like Eric Voegelin sees this too, that there is a continuity from the classical era, including the birth of Christianity, and the modern world. If we're humanitarian as moderns, or if we're egalitarian as moderns, that doesn't happen without Christianity or Judaism. So Nietzsche saw this. If we want to kind of divide it all up, and if some people want to say Christianity good, modernity bad, or something like that, Nietzsche says there's a package here, and of course he's got a lot of that right. In the end, he put it in this very stunning way. He said it's Dionysus versus the crucified. And as far as when he was going into madness, he would start signing his letters as Dionysus. That is the god who was ripped apart and reborn, as opposed to the hanged god. What he saw in Dionysus was an affirmation of exuberant life. That's what he saw, whereas he saw in the crucified an ugly rejection of life. So what Nietzsche really wants to do, and he does it with different kinds of terms, like amor fati, he takes on the Stoic term about the love of fate, where he spins it out in his own mythology of the eternal recurrence of the same, this notion that he thought, given the thermodynamics of the time, that given infinite time, the molecules would eventually rearrange over and over again, giving you this same life. And he found, when that thought first occurred to him, he was horrified, but he thought, if I can affirm this, then I've become healthy. So what he wants to do is to affirm existence when God is dead, as he says. He's the one who declares God is dead. It doesn't mean that he thinks God once was and died. He does believe that he's an atheist. He's not worked up about, he just takes it for granted that God doesn't exist. But he's saying when he announces that God is dead, he's saying to you, you're living in a way that assumes that God still exists, that the God you've always lived from the Judaism and Christianity. But you're not living that way anymore. You're living in contradiction to, so there is a difference to be made between the modern variant of this Jewish Christian base and the way we're living it now. He's saying, the modern scientific world, God is dead and you've got to wake up. And with me, affirm existence even though God is dead. This is where he's rejecting Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer literally said, this is the philosophy of pessimism. What Nietzsche wants is a non-pessimistic immanentism. That is, it's a closed system that's developing in a vitalist way. Life is developing, and there's nothing underneath it. There's no super ground, no God. If in the face of something that could be a very horrifying realization that there's no ground for this immanent process, can you still say yes and be non-pessimistic and be healthy and live out, as he called it, the gay science that is a cheerful science, as opposed to, say, the dismal sciences of economy, political economy, and so on. He said, can you be alive? Even if there is, can you avoid nihilism, even if there is no transcendent warrant for your life? That is Nietzsche's vision. Now, we can try to get different, cash out different systematic implications from his thought, but he was always shifting, really. He says at the beginning of Beyond Good and Evil, suppose truth is a woman. Now, there's all kinds of misogyny in his writing and so on. Part of it is he wasn't lucky in love. He did say once that a married philosopher is a joke. And there's something there with Kierkegaard, though, because that line from Shakespeare that Kierkegaard uses as an epigraph for philosophical fragments, better well hanged than ill wed. And Nietzsche, Kierkegaard had rejected marriage for himself, right? So there might be some commonality there. There's something about the philosophical vocation that seems, I can't conform to the normal ways of the world, right? But suppose truth is a woman, Nietzsche says. So that we'll end with this thought about truth. He says, philosophers have always been clumsy lovers in trying to woo that woman. And what is that to say except philosophy is an erotic enterprise, that it's an enterprise of love, philosophia, right? It's to yearn for this truth, what is it that we're yearning for? Nietzsche is a philosopher who wants to be a better lover of the truth. Now, he doesn't think the truth is some transcendent thing. It's what makes for a healthy and beautiful existence. And can I woo that woman in a way that is, that can I commit to something that is evanescent? Truth is something that changes for Nietzsche. Can I embrace truth, the truth here and now, and say, I will hold you, even though I can't guarantee that there will be an eternity to this? That kind of commitment, that kind of a loving commitment to something beautiful right here, right now, and to stake your existence on it, that's what Nietzsche was trying to get at. And whether that in the end is a coherent way to live one's life, that's another question. But we should definitely be moved by how forceful he makes a plea to each one of us to live a life that is beautiful, to live a life that dances upon even the great abysses that we all know to exist in our lives.